When economists think about advertising, they normally classify it into two different categories by function. One is informational advertising and the other is persuasive advertising. Informational advertising simply means advertising that is designed to provide information about the price of a product, or the existence of a product, or the quality of the product. It's not attempting to convince consumers to think of the product in a new way, but rather is just providing information. So, for example, this kind of advertising is informational advertising. It simply shows you what the product is, tells you what the price is, says there's a special deal, and the time period for that deal. Another kind of informational advertising is this here. Now, this is obviously being a bit more creative. At the end of the day, it's simply informational advertising, however. It's just reminding consumers of the existence of the product. Persuasive advertising, on the other hand, is advertising that attempts to change the tastes of consumers. It tries to change their preferences, persuade them to buy this product rather than a different product. It normally revolves around convincing consumers that the product being advertised will in some way satisfy an unfulfilled want or need, or fulfill it better than a rival product, even if that unfulfilled want or need is not apparently directly related to the product. So, for example, it might be convincing you that if you something that you might want in your life is to be happy and successful and have lots of friends. That's an inbuilt want that people have, and the advertising might be attempting to convince you that buying the product will give you those things. So here's an example of persuasive advertising. What information does it provide? Well, not much. It tells you that there's a business, a fitness business, a gym. But what's the message of the advertising? The message of the advertising is exceed, be at the top. That is, you'll be in some way successful in your life if you go to this gym, and you'll look like the person in that in that billboard. Of course, this has nothing to do with reality. It's just attempting to persuade you to sign up for gym membership. In fact, a lot of the time, the business model of gym membership crucially depends on you never attaining what's shown in the image here. In fact, it's often premised on you never actually going to the gym at all. So you pay money and then you don't turn up, and so that the costs of the business are lower because it doesn't have customers destroying their gym equipment. From the perspective of economists, probably one of the most important things that they're interested in is what we're looking at here: advertising elasticity of demand, which is really can be summed up as what kind of bang for your buck do you get. So we're interested in the relationship between a advertising expenditure, a change in advertising expenditure measured as a percentage, and the impact that that has on the quantity demanded of the product, measured as a percentage. So the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a given percentage increase in advertising spending. we can represent this relationship, this causal relationship, with our ratio, or our advertising elasticity of demand coefficient, representing the effect over the cause. If the advertising elasticity of demand coefficient is greater than 1, then we say demand is relatively elastic with respect to advertising. So, for example, if the coefficient is, say, 2, it means that for a 1% increase in advertising spending, there's a 2% increase in the quantity demanded. That is, the effect is larger than the cause, elastic. On the other hand, if the coefficient is between 0 and 1, so it's, say for example, 0.2, it means that for a 1% increase in advertising spending, there's only a 0.2% increase in the quantity demanded. We'd say that demand is relatively inelastic with respect to advertising spending. It's not very responsive because the effect, increase in the quantity demanded, 0.2%, is less than the cause, a 1% increase in advertising. Just as a side note, if notice here we're talking about positive coefficients. So if you increase advertising expenditure, you get an increase in the quantity demanded. What if the coefficient were negative? What would that mean? Well, that would mean say if it were negative 3, that would mean for a 1% increase in advertising expenditure, there's a 3% decrease in the quantity demanded. That would indicate to you that that particular advertising that had been engaged in was a stunning failure for some reason or other. And in that case, you would sack your marketing department and replace them with competent people. Advertising elasticity of demand is not going to be the same for every product. It will depend on many factors. One of the main factors is going to be simply the success of the advertisement in conveying the intended message. That is, does this advertising really connect with the target group of consumers? Does it burrow into their fears and hopes and motivate them to purchase the product that you're offering for sale? That's largely going to be a function of the market research and the imaginativeness and the innovation of the marketing department of a business. But it's not the only factor which influences the bang for the buck effect. There's numerous other factors as well. One is the quality of the advertising. The higher the quality of the advertising, studies seem to indicate, the more likely it is that the advertising effect will be larger. So if the advertising is crappy, it looks crappy, then you'll tend to have less of an impact on demand for the product. Knowledge of the product is also a factor. If consumers already know about the product that is being offered for sale and that is being advertised, the advertising is likely to have a much smaller impact on quantity demanded than if the product is new or unknown to the consumers. The number of competitors' advertisements. So if there are many competitors in the market and they're all advertising like you are, then your advertisement is going to be struggling to gain the attention of the pool of potential consumers. However, if there are very few other competitors who are advertising in the marketplace, your additional advertising is likely to have a larger impact on the quantity demanded. And then there's the effectiveness of competitor advertisements. Whatever the number of other competitors in the market who are advertising, you also have to take into account the effectiveness of that competitor's advertising. If competitors produce a really great advertising campaign, then that means, relative to your own, when you increase your advertising expenditure, it's likely to have a smaller impact on the quantity demanded compared to if your competitors put out a crappy advertising campaign that was not very convincing. In that case, when you increase your advertising, you're likely to experience a much larger increase in the quantity demanded for your product.